All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into something I know a lot of you are interested in, especially our listeners in India: fruit and diabetes. We've got all sorts of research papers, guidelines, even some insights specifically about Indian dietary practices, those mangoes, those sweets that we all love.
It's a question we get a lot, how to enjoy all those amazing fruits and still keep those blood sugar levels in check. And we actually came across some really interesting research, a pretty big study out of China, actually, that looked at how eating fruit is connected to your risk of diabetes.
Oh, yeah, this one really caught my eye. I mean, we're not talking about a small study here. This one followed over 500,000 adults. And the findings, well, they were pretty amazing, to be honest. People who ate fresh fruit regularly, they had a 12% lower risk of getting type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I thought was really interesting. Some fruits had an even stronger connection to that lower risk, like citrus fruits, apples, pears, those kinds of things.
Right, and what's really cool is that it wasn't just about preventing diabetes. It seems like eating fruit can also help people who already have type 2 diabetes. Those who ate fresh fruit more than 3 days a week, they had a lower risk of complications from the disease and even a lower risk of, well, dying from any cause.
So it's not just about avoiding all the bad stuff. You can actually help yourself by adding in the good stuff, too. Those fresh fruits, I mean, they can really make a difference.
Absolutely. Now, to really get a handle on how to make smart choices about fruit, especially if you're thinking about an Indian diet, we got to dig into the glycemic index and glycemic load.
Right. Those are terms I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard before. But I think it's good to go a little deeper. It's not just about memorizing some chart. It's about understanding how these things actually play out in real life.
Exactly. And, we always hear about how we should avoid high GI foods, but it's actually not always that simple. Take watermelon, for example. It's got a high GI, meaning that sugar gets absorbed quickly, but the GL is actually pretty low because a normal serving doesn't have a ton of sugar in it.
So even if you're keeping an eye on your blood sugar, you can still have some watermelon.
Exactly. It's all about context. Like having a reasonable amount of watermelon with the meal, where you've got some protein and fiber in there too, that's completely different from chugging a big glass of watermelon juice on an empty stomach.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like all the different parts of your meal work together. But now I'm kind of curious, how does some of the other Indian fruits fit into all of this GI and GL stuff? I mean, mangoes, everybody loves mangoes,
Hmm.
but if you have diabetes, it's almost like you have to feel guilty about eating them.
Well, mangoes do tend to have a higher GI, but that doesn't mean they're totally off limits. Let's talk about that a bit more.
Yes, please. Because I don't think any of us want to live in a world without mangoes.
No, not at all. The key is moderation, right? And pairing them with the right things. Plus, understanding how your own body reacts. So, if you have a small portion of mango with a meal that includes protein and fiber, that can really help to balance things out.
It's all about balance. But
Mm.
what about all those traditional Indian sweets, those halwas and mithais? Those are like a big part of our culture. Are those completely off the table if you're trying to manage diabetes?
Well, they can be tricky for sure. You might start with a fruit like mango or
Mhm.
papaya, but a lot of the traditional ways of making them, they use a lot of sugar, ghee, and other ingredients. And all that can really bump up the GI and GL.
That's what I figured. So it's not just the food itself, it's how it's prepared. But I think for a lot of our listeners, it's just not realistic to give up all those sweets.
You're right. It's about finding that balance again. And the good news is there's this whole movement toward making healthier versions of Indian sweets.
Okay, so tell me about that. What are people doing to make those sweets a little healthier?
Well, for example, they're using things like jaggery, dates, or honey, but just a little bit. And we're seeing some recipes using oats, quinoa, other whole grains to add more fiber and bring down the overall GI.
So you can still enjoy those familiar flavors. It's not about saying no to everything. It's about making smarter choices. But, let's be real. Sometimes you just crave those full sugar sweets, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's when portion control and how often you eat them come into play. Maybe instead of having them every day, you save them for special occasions, and then you just have a small amount.
That sounds like a good plan. Mindful indulgence instead of just saying no completely.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious about some of those Indian fruits that maybe don't get as much attention, like jamun, amla, even bitter gourd. I hear they might be good for diabetes. Is there any truth to that?
Oh, definitely. In fact, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to take a closer look at the research on those unique fruits and see how they might fit into a diabetes-friendly diet, especially in the context of all those delicious Indian dishes.
I can't wait. It sounds like we're going to discover some real hidden gems. We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive into fruit and diabetes in India.
Welcome back to our deep dive into fruit and diabetes in India.
Okay, so we're picking up where we left off, right? Talking about those fruits that maybe don't get as much attention, but they could be real powerhouses when it comes to diabetes.
Exactly, and I think you're going to be really interested in some of the research we found.
Well, let's start with jamon then. That dark purple fruit. It's sweet, a little tart, and I know it has a really low GI, which is great for blood sugar. Actually, my grandmother used to swear by jamon for her blood sugar. She always said it helped her.
That's interesting because there's actually some science to back that up. Research suggests that Jamin might actually improve insulin sensitivity, which is super important for managing type 2 diabetes.
So it's not just an old wives' tale.
Not at all. There have even been studies showing that it can help lower fasting blood sugar levels.
Wow, okay, so jamon is definitely more than just a tasty treat then. What about amla? The Indian gooseberry. I know it's full of vitamin C, but does it do anything for blood sugar?
Amla is another one that's packed with benefits. It's got tons of antioxidants, and it's been used in traditional Indian medicine forever, for all sorts of things, including diabetes.
Interesting.
We definitely need more research. But some early studies suggest that amla might help regulate blood sugar and even improve insulin sensitivity, too.
So JAMA and amla both have some real potential. What about bitter gourd, though? I mean, the name doesn't exactly make it sound like a delicious fruit.
I know, right? But bitter gourd, despite the name and the taste, is getting more attention for its potential benefits for diabetes.
Okay, I'm listening.
It actually has compounds in it that might act like insulin in the body, helping to lower those blood sugar levels. And some studies have shown that it can be really effective at reducing those blood sugar spikes you get after a meal.
That's amazing. It's like we have this whole natural pharmacy right here in India, and we've been overlooking some of these amazing fruits.
I agree. I think it's so important that we don't dismiss traditional knowledge
Yeah.
and that we keep exploring the science behind those traditions. It's not about replacing conventional treatments. It's about having more options and looking at health from a more holistic perspective.
I like that. It's about giving people the power to take control of their own health and finding what works best for them. You know, we talked earlier about traditional Indian sweets and how to navigate those if you're managing diabetes. We talked about portion control, healthier alternatives, that kind of thing. But what about those times when you just can't resist those full sugar sweets, like during a special occasion or something?
That's a great question. And remember, it's not about depriving yourself, it's about making conscious choices. One thing you can do is to kind of balance things out throughout the day. So if you know you're going to have a rich dessert later, maybe you choose lighter meals and lower GI foods earlier in the day.
So it's like budgeting your sugar intake for the day. That way you can have a little splurge without throwing your blood sugar completely out of whack.
Exactly. And another thing is, moderation is key. Instead of having a huge serving of that tempting dessert, just have a smaller portion and really savor it.
Yeah, sometimes we eat mindlessly, especially when we're celebrating, and we end up eating way more than we intended to. It's a good reminder to slow down, pay attention, and really enjoy each bite. Are there any other tips for navigating those festive occasions?
Definitely. Don't forget about exercise. Even a quick walk after a big meal can make a difference in your blood sugar levels. And it's good for your overall health, too.
Right, movement is medicine, as they say.
And it's also important to be aware of your own personal triggers. Some people are more sensitive to certain types of sweets or ingredients. Pay attention to how your body reacts and adjust accordingly.
So it's like becoming your own health detective. What works for one person might not work for someone else. You're a big advocate for personalized approaches to health. How can people go beyond those general guidelines and really personalize their fruit choices for better blood sugar management?
That's where monitoring your blood sugar comes in. And working closely with your healthcare team, of course. When you monitor your blood sugar, you can actually see how your body responds to different fruits in different amounts and at different times of the day.
So you're not just relying on some generic chart. You're creating a plan that's based on your own body's feedback.
Exactly. For example, some people might find that they can handle certain high GI fruits better in the morning, while others might see a big spike even with a small amount. It's all about experimenting and figuring out what works for you.
This has been so insightful. We've learned so much from those amazing low GI fruits to practical tips for handling those delicious Indian sweets.
We've only just scratched the surface. In the last part of our deep dive, we're going to look at some more resources and strategies to help you use all this information and really take charge of your health.
I can't wait. We'll be back soon with the final part of our exploration into fruit and diabetes in India. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've covered so much about fruit and diabetes in India, from those low GI gems like jamun to how to deal with those amazing Indian sweets.
Yeah, we've really gone deep, and now it's all about giving you the tools you need to really make this work for you, to personalize your approach, to make those informed choices.
You know, one thing that's really come through loud and clear for me throughout this whole deep dive
Yeah.
is just how important fiber is for managing blood sugar. It's like it slows everything down,
Yeah.
keeps those sugar spikes from happening.
Absolutely. And the great thing is fruits are naturally packed with fiber. So it's not just about picking low GI fruits. It's about looking for those high fiber ones too, like
Yeah.
berries, apples, make sure you eat the skin on those, pears. Those are all good examples.
Those are some tasty options, I've got to say. What about fruit juices, though? They seem healthy, but I have a feeling there's more to the story, especially for people with diabetes.
You're right to be a little wary. See, fruit juices, they're convenient, but they often don't have all that fiber that whole fruits do. And without that fiber to slow things down, the sugar from the juice hits your bloodstream way faster. And that's what can cause those spikes we're trying to avoid.
So stick to the whole fruits as much as possible. Limit the juice.
That's the best approach for sure. And if you are going to have juice, make absolutely sure it's 100% fruit juice, no added sugar. Those sneaky added sugars can really mess things up.
Whole fruits it is. So where can our listeners go if they want to keep learning about all this? Are there any good websites, organizations, anything like that you recommend?
Oh, absolutely. The University of Sydney's GI database is a fantastic one. It's got tons of information on the GI and GL of all kinds of foods, including fruits.
That sounds really useful. And for our listeners in India, are there any specific resources that are helpful?
Definitely, the Indian Dietetic Association and the National Institute of Nutrition are both great resources. They've got all sorts of evidence-based info on nutrition and managing diabetes. They even do workshops and webinars, and they have recipes that are specifically designed for the Indian diet.
Those sound great. And of course, we can't forget the most important resource, your own healthcare team.
Right. Your doctor, your dietitian, your diabetes educator, they can give you personalized advice and answer any questions you might have. They can also help you understand those blood sugar readings and make sure your diet is working for you.
It's a team effort. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think one thing that's really stood out to me is this. It's not about restricting yourself, about feeling deprived. It's about having the knowledge and the tools to make healthy choices and still get to enjoy all those amazing fruits.
I completely agree. It's about being mindful, listening to your body, and making those choices that work for you. And remember, this isn't a one-time thing. There's always more to learn, and your needs might change over time.
That's so true. It's a journey, not a destination.
And one more thing, don't be afraid to ask for help. Use those resources we talked about, talk to your healthcare team, and remember, you're not alone in this.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into fruit and diabetes in India. I hope you all found it informative and helpful, and maybe even a little inspiring.
It's been a pleasure sharing this with you. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep learning.
And take care of yourselves.
Yeah.
We'll catch you on our next deep dive adventure.